Welcome everybody to the Storytime channel. My name is Steven, and today we have some malicious compliance stories. Our first story of the day is by Blacklight Starlight. Women can't pray, but the verses you gave me say otherwise. I was sitting here reading some outrageous comments on Facebook that had to do with the beliefs of Church of Christ and their followings, and it reminded me that I had another story I had mentioned in my previous entry. So here it is. For context, this happened my senior year of high school and I was 17. I was always a year younger than most of my classmates due to a late birthday. Now I'm going to preface this again in reminding that I have health conditions that make my memory spotty at best, but this one is a favorite story of mine as it was a real turning point for me in terms of standing up for myself and against overzealous religious people. I had moved schools from public to private halfway into my junior year. During this time, I was devoutly Christian, Southern Baptist. I loved my little hidden-in-the-woods church and was the female lead in my youth group. When I got into the school, I wasn't aware it was Church of Christ based, so it was a hard clash. For those who aren't familiar, religious sects don't really get along in their beliefs. Church of Christ don't believe in using instruments, women leaders, and really follow anything a group of older men get together once a month to decide is law. This is in my experience. As a Baptist, I was used to jamming out, being asked to pray before the congregation as a youth, etc. I'm also going to say I never approved of having Bible classes in a non-elective school setting. In my senior year, my physics book was special made to include prayers and tried desperately to tie in God in everything we learned. In junior year, my anatomy teacher couldn't even say the male reproductive part and was blushing and scolding me when I just said it. It was hilarious. Anyways, senior year, we had the preacher of the church who basically funded the school as our Bible teacher. I was always at odds with him. He made the mistake of saying he loved having debates with his students, something he made a rule against in his syllabus the next year my friends showed me because I questioned him and had my own verses as backup. See, my own church was training me to be a youth leader and used their funds to help with it. I was well versed in the Bible. Every single time I spoke up and disagreed, he lowered my grade to failing for the day. And every time my mom would go up to the school to our counselor, we had no principal, it was a tiny private school, my graduating class was 14, and got it raised to at least a C. So my hatred for this guy was already down-packed. The main problem was that from the beginning, he separated seating and had the boys sit on one side and girls on the other with 2 rows between us. He would ask us different questions, use different verses, even say different things had different meanings based on our gender. The real problem? He only asked guys to pray before leaving class. I get it, now, it wasn't that big of a deal, but being a devout teen, this always irked me, but I hated having C's in classes, so I had stopped talking. Until one day, the guys of the class approached me with a proposition. Next class, will you ask to pray? We're sick of doing it and don't think it's right he leaves the girls out. See, they knew that the other girls would never do it being in the same denomination. But me? They knew I was itching for another battle with this man. Next class comes along and he asks which guy would like to pray. Yes, he would be specific, and I raised my hand. Sir, I really feel like God is speaking to me to do today's prayer. May I? He gives me this, "Are you kidding me?" look and flat out tells me, "OP, you know I only want the guys to pray in here." Well, why? I asked, bracing myself. Because men are the leaders and I should be training them as such. Leaders for the church, their families, and their peers, he said proudly. I pray all the time over my peers in my church, I respond, feeling myself tear up as confrontation was not my strong suit. Well, that's your church. This is mine, so that's that, he replies. You could just say you're sexist and get it over with. The class was in shock. The girls next to me were smugly saying he wasn't sexist, it's just how it is. Some of the boys were holding back laughter. The preacher looked angry before stating it was biblical. Oh, I knew I had him now. I demanded he give me the Bible verses that said women aren't allowed to pray out loud or over their peers, and he gives me 3 before praying himself, and we all leave the homeroom. I'm starting to cry, and the boys all give me side hugs. church hugs as we called them, saying that went way better than they hoped and that one of them wrote down the verses. So we went and looked them up. Here is where it becomes malicious compliance. Now, I don't remember the exact verses, but all of them had exact guidelines for me to follow for me to be able to be appropriate to pray in public. Now, every day we had chapel for a few minutes before lunch or next classes, and it was I think a week later when I was able to use his own verses to comply. Chapel was being led by our head counselor and luckily our Bible teacher that day. And everything fell into place. The counselor said, "Let's have a senior pray before we leave." I grinned as I went down my checklist and flipped up my hood on my hoodie and raised my hand proudly yelling, "I'm ready now." They both looked at me, the preacher angry again, but the counselor was amused, having already been told by me what had happened, as he was a chill guy, and he asked after the preacher talked to him about it. Of course, he reprimanded me for calling him sexist, but I didn't get into any real trouble. Anyways, the preacher had a sudden look of shock as I grinned directly at him as I pointed to my covered head, showing I read his 3 verses and was maliciously complying to them. Be with peers or among other women? Check. Have seniority and a request? Check. Have your head covered? Check. So unless he wanted to get caught in a loop of, "Oh, that's not what I meant," I was finally allowed to pray. From then on, he prayed after every class ended, and didn't bother asking because I always had a hood of some kind just in case. Ironically, this school was a huge reason I turned from being a Christian due to bullying and outrageous rich people entitlement, and I hear they are shutting down. They wanted so bad to be a family, but kicked students out that needed family the most, even going so far as planting vodka in someone's locker. Good riddance. We need not go into the goods and bads of certain religions or denominations. All I'm gonna say is twisting the words of any kind of specific denomination in a way that excludes specific people just because you think they don't deserve to do whatever it is that you're trying to exclude them from, I think that's pretty messed up. Our next story is by Dommy Blushes 1998. Don't work overtime? No problem, boss. I, 22-year-old female, work for a large retail chain in one of their smaller stores. Not a mega store, but still sizable. Each department has multiple people. Manager, controller, and usually 2 to 4 floor workers. I'm one of the 2 floor workers in my section, and we can normally handle the deliveries, floor work, restocking, and customer service. That was until January. The manager took his time off, he worked through the festive season, the controller caught the dreaded you-know-what, and the other worker also chose to take her off time. She wasn't aware of the situation. This left little me to do the work of 4 people all by myself. With no manager, the merchandisers who could have helped me acted like my section no longer existed. I ended up working overtime through January and put in around 12 extra hours to ensure the store was at the expected level of order. Except they didn't pay me for overtime. When I asked questions, the HR manager yelled at me, told me my overtime approval ended at the end of December, convenient, and best of all, he told me that I should quit if I'm going to have such a big mouth. It was made very clear that the extra work was not appreciated and they just saw an opportunity for free labor. This is a shortened version of what happened. The man literally had me in tears, and this was in front of customers, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, cool. Time for some malicious compliance. I won't do any more overtime. Just the next month, an important visit was scheduled. The big boss was coming to check on us, and we had to be perfect. Here's the catch. My deliveries come in at 6 a.m. and 4 p.m. most days. They should be unpacked immediately. This is a 2-hour job at a minimum. Yeah, my shift is 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. So I just stopped helping with the second delivery, even if there was no one there to do it. I went home. Shelves a mess? Go home. No staff? Go home. Delivery coming in? Nah, go home. My manager asked me why I was no longer doing my job like I used to. I told what the HR manager said, also told my union rep. Guess who's not allowed to talk to me without a witness present now? Just imagine being somebody in an HR position and literally telling somebody, you need to not have such a big mouth. Could you imagine that getting away anywhere for anybody in an HR position of all things? This next story is by Queasy Peanut 928. Open a ticket for that. You got it. So I work for a large company that, like many, track IT issues by tickets. Some time back, we had a large major system issue, like the system was unstable for many days, disappearing data, etc. We didn't get immediate help and raised heck about it because these issues cost us real money. We were told they measure the significance of the problem by the number of tickets opened. I asked specifically, what if the system is down for everyone? Can't I, one of the managers, just put in a ticket and call to have it escalated? The answer was no. Oh, and the ticket system emails the appropriate people in IT and all the management in my department. So when you open a ticket, everyone in management is notified. You see where this is going? We had a major system issue a few weeks later, and we had an issue with every customer at once. I opened Word, created a document with the basic problem, and then grabbed a list of all the customers I could get quickly, so only about 30. In rapid-fire fashion, using copy and paste, I opened 30 tickets in 30 minutes. About 20 minutes into this, management was being spammed with emails, as was IT. My IMs are lighting up and blinking with messages from coworkers, not IT, with messages like, "Enough," and "We get the point," and "Are you having fun yet? Can you stop now?" Nothing acknowledging the severity of the issue. So I kept going. At 30 minutes, my boss called me and told me he thinks I made my point. I agree. The issue got rather quickly resolved, and we now have a new procedure. For serious problems where we have a large impact, I can open a ticket and send a few examples to an assigned IT liaison who can give it a look over for severity, and I usually have an answer in 60 seconds how they are going to escalate. Keep those ticket stories coming. It kind of blows your mind that in events of massive colossal failure, they wouldn't be able to escalate it. The equivalent of a fire breaking out over your entire business and, "Nah, you guys have to fill out enough tickets before we take a look." How does that function? And our final story of the day is by Bravefield. Send it exactly like this. As part of my job working in complaints, I write letters to customers. We don't use templates, and each letter is tailored to the individual. Sometimes customers raise multiple complaint points, and each point is carefully addressed in the letter we send. We outline everything the customer is unhappy with, our full investigation, and what we are doing to put this right, or alternatively explaining carefully why their complaint is not justified. A new manager, Steve, was hired a few months ago, and he decided that we were wasting too much time writing letters, and he was going to come up with a template for us to use, as we were obviously too simple to understand how letters are meant to work. So he goes off and drafts a template and proudly shares it with us all. It was crap, to put it bluntly. It was full of typos and grammatical errors, but it also did not contain details of what the complaint was about or how we had resolved it. Of course, this was pointed out to him in full why this was not appropriate and why it would lead to more complaints, and it's basically terrible customer service. He lost his temper, screamed and yelled until 3 separate people cried and 2 logged out of the virtual meeting. Afterwards, he sent an email saying he wants his letter used exactly as he has attached it. Who am I to argue? I sent the letters exactly as he had written them, copied and pasted to ensure nothing was changed exactly as he asked, right down to his signature and contact details at the bottom of the letter. I told the rest of the team, and they are all sending letters with Steve's details too. Within the first week, he had 40 customers call him and email complaining about the letter we had sent. The week after, 50 irate customers. Steve hasn't looked into the complaint, so he doesn't know how to address any of the customers or understand their issues. So I get phone calls day in and day out. "This man is livid, what was his complaint about?" Each time I reply, "Oh, it should all be explained in the letter I sent. You know, the one detailing all complaint points, my investigation, and resolution in full. I would just check that. Bye." The whole department is now under investigation as customer satisfaction has tanked. Best bit is each and every dissatisfaction is scored against Steve. Every other member of staff has 100% satisfaction as nothing is logged against us. Our name isn't on the letter. Steve is on 0%. It's a terrible shame. And this is exactly why you don't have the big bosses at the top handle the support or PR facing jobs. The people who just have no grasp on how to actually properly write a paragraph or even a sentence that feels professional, concise, and gets to the heart of the issue. Steve sunk himself. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like. And if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So, until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.